I still remember the day my sister erased me. My sister erased me from my grandmother's burial while hundreds of people watched, and for 5 years everyone believed I had abandoned my own family. What nobody knew was that a single piece of paper hidden inside an old courthouse would one day force her to beg for mercy. By then, the damage had already destroyed lives, relationships, and every illusion I once had about the people who raised me. My name is Emily Carter, and 5 years ago I stood beside my grandmother's coffin feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. The strange thing was that only a week earlier, I still believed my family loved me. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not equally, but I believed we were still a family. Looking back now, I realize I was holding on to a version of reality that no longer existed. My grandmother, Margaret Carter, was the center of our family. She was the woman who remembered every birthday, every graduation, every achievement, no matter how small. When my parents forgot something important, Grandma remembered. When someone was struggling, Grandma noticed. She had a way of making every person feel seen. At least that was how she treated me. My older sister, Vanessa, often complained that Grandma favored me, but Grandma always denied it. She would simply smile and say that love was not something that needed to be divided equally. Love grew bigger the more you gave away. The truth was that Grandma and I shared a special bond. After school, I spent countless afternoons at her house. She taught me how to bake, how to garden, and how to fix things around the house. She said every girl should know how to solve her own problems. While other children watched television, I sat beside her listening to stories about our family history. She told me about sacrifices, mistakes, victories, and regrets. She wanted me to understand where I came from. Vanessa hated those afternoons. She never said it directly, but everyone could see it. Whenever Grandma invited us both over, Vanessa found excuses to leave early. She rolled her eyes when Grandma shared family stories. She complained that the old house smelled like dust and old books. At the time, I thought it was normal teenage behavior. Now I understand it was something deeper. She saw every moment I spent with Grandma as proof that she was losing something that belonged to her. As we grew older, the distance between Vanessa and me became impossible to ignore. We were only 3 years apart, but it felt like we lived in different worlds. I worked part-time jobs and saved money for college. Vanessa jumped from one expensive hobby to another. My parents always found money to support her dreams. When I needed something, I usually figured it out myself. Grandma noticed these differences long before I did. She never criticized my parents directly, but sometimes I caught sadness in her eyes. About 2 years before her death, Grandma started talking about the future more often. She updated paperwork, organized documents, and met with lawyers. She told me not to worry about details because she was simply being responsible. I believed her. Death felt distant. She was strong, active, and independent. Even in her 70s, she worked in her garden every morning and walked through town like she owned every sidewalk. Then everything changed during one terrible winter. Grandma became sick very suddenly. What started as exhaustion became hospital visits. Hospital visits became treatments. Treatments became long conversations spoken in quiet voices outside hospital rooms. The woman who had always seemed unbreakable began shrinking before our eyes. Even then, she spent more time comforting everyone else than talking about her own pain. During those final months, I visited her almost every day. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we simply sat together in silence. One afternoon, she held my hand longer than usual and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not fear. It was concern. The kind of concern a person feels when they know they are leaving someone behind. She told me something that stayed with me for years. She said that people reveal their true character when they believe nobody can stop them. At the time, I thought she was talking about life in general. I nodded and smiled. I had no idea she was trying to warn me. The day she died felt unreal. Family members filled the hospital hallways. Friends arrived with flowers. Neighbors brought food to our house. Everyone cried. Even Vanessa cried harder than I expected. For a brief moment, grief seemed to erase every division between us. We hugged each other. We shared memories. We promised to stay close. That fragile peace lasted exactly 6 days. The burial attracted more people than anyone expected. Grandma had spent decades helping people throughout our community. Former coworkers, church members, neighbors, and distant relatives arrived from different states. The parking lot overflowed. People stood quietly beneath gray skies while holding umbrellas against a steady drizzle. I arrived early to help prepare everything. My parents seemed distracted. Vanessa seemed strangely confident. Looking back, I remember how she kept checking her phone and whispering with my mother. At the time, I assumed they were managing funeral arrangements. I never imagined they were planning something else entirely. The ceremony began peacefully. Speakers shared stories about Grandma's kindness. People cried openly. I cried too. Every memory felt like a reminder that the person who understood me best was gone forever. I struggled to stay composed as the coffin rested beneath a canopy surrounded by flowers. Then something happened that changed the course of my life. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped forward carrying a folded page filled with memories I had written the night before. Before I could begin, Vanessa suddenly approached the microphone. She smiled politely and placed a hand on my arm. To everyone watching, it looked affectionate. Then she told me I would not be speaking. At first, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She announced that the family had decided to limit speakers due to time. She claimed everyone had agreed. She thanked me for understanding before I could even respond. Then she turned toward the crowd and continued speaking as though I did not exist. I stood frozen. Hundreds of faces stared at me. Nobody understood what had happened. Some assumed I had volunteered to step aside. Others probably thought I was overwhelmed by grief. The reality was much worse. I looked toward my parents, expecting them to intervene. Instead, they avoided my eyes. That moment hurt more than anything Vanessa said. The speech I had written remained folded in my hand while my sister spoke about family, unity, and honoring Grandma's legacy. Every sentence felt like a performance. Every smile felt rehearsed. I wanted to interrupt. I wanted to defend myself. But grief and shock left me speechless. When the ceremony ended, people approached Vanessa to offer condolences. They praised her speech. They thanked her for representing the family so beautifully. I became invisible. And before the day was over, things would become even worse. Because while mourners gathered around the cemetery grounds, a conversation was beginning behind closed doors that would quietly erase my name from something far bigger than a funeral program. I would not learn about it until much later, after signatures were collected, stories were rewritten, and a secret connected to $3.2 million started changing hands. For weeks after the burial, I tried to convince myself that what happened at the cemetery had been a misunderstanding. Grief affects people in strange ways. That was the excuse I repeated every night when I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I wanted to believe my sister had acted impulsively. I wanted to believe my parents had been distracted. Most of all, I wanted to believe that the family I knew still existed somewhere beneath the confusion and pain. But the world outside our house was already telling a different story. The first sign appeared at the grocery store about 2 weeks after the funeral. A woman who had known Grandma for years stopped me near the entrance. She gave me a disappointed look and asked why I had refused to speak at the burial. Her tone carried the same judgment people use when discussing someone who failed a basic moral test. I corrected her immediately. I explained that I had wanted to speak. I explained that Vanessa had stopped me. The woman frowned. She told me that was not what she had heard. According to several people, I had become emotional and refused to participate. Others believed I had argued with family members before the ceremony. One version even claimed I had left the cemetery early because I was upset about Grandma's estate. Every rumor painted me as selfish, unstable, or disrespectful. I walked back to my car feeling sick. The rumors spread faster than I could correct them. At church, neighbors looked at me differently. Family friends became distant. People who once greeted me warmly now spoke with cautious politeness. Someone had created a new version of events, and that version was spreading through the community like wildfire. The source became obvious during a family dinner about a month later. My parents invited relatives to our house. The atmosphere felt normal at first. Food covered the dining room table. People shared stories about Grandma. Children played in the living room. For a brief moment, I felt hopeful. Then one of my cousins mentioned the burial. Before I could speak, Vanessa answered. She described the day as though she had protected the family from embarrassment. She claimed I had suffered some kind of emotional breakdown. She said she stepped in because she did not want Grandma's farewell ruined by unnecessary drama. Everyone listened. Nobody questioned her. The confidence in her voice made the lie sound believable. I stared at my parents, waiting for them to correct the story. Neither of them said a word. That silence felt like betrayal. Not because they actively supported her. Because they allowed it. After dinner, I confronted my mother privately in the kitchen. I asked why she had remained silent. I asked why she was letting Vanessa rewrite what happened. My mother's answer changed something inside me. She told me to let it go. She said people needed peace. She said arguing about the funeral would only create more division. Then she said something even worse. She suggested that maybe Vanessa's version was better for everyone. Better for everyone. The words echoed in my head for days. I started wondering how many other things had been quietly rewritten without my knowledge. Around that same time, strange details began surfacing. Grandma's house remained empty longer than expected. The lawyer handling estate matters delayed meetings several times. Questions about finances received vague answers. Whenever I asked for updates, someone changed the subject. Vanessa seemed unusually cheerful despite the family's recent loss. She bought new clothes. She talked about future plans. She spent hours making phone calls behind closed doors. None of it made sense. Grandma had always been organized. She believed unfinished business created unnecessary problems. There should have been clear communication regarding her estate. Instead, everything felt hidden behind layers of secrecy. One afternoon, I drove past Grandma's house. The sight stopped me cold. Several men were walking through the property carrying measuring equipment. A truck parked near the driveway displayed the logo of a real estate development company. I pulled over immediately. When I approached the workers, they assumed I already knew why they were there. One man casually mentioned preliminary assessments. Another referenced future ownership discussions. Future ownership. The phrase sent a chill through me. Nobody had informed me about any ownership discussions. Nobody had mentioned developers. Nobody had mentioned property evaluations. I called my father the moment I returned to my car. His reaction was immediate. He sounded irritated rather than surprised. He claimed everything was under control and told me not to interfere. Not to interfere. Those words stayed with me. Interfere with what? Grandma's property? Family business? My own questions? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. A week later, another strange event pushed me even further toward suspicion. While cleaning old boxes in my apartment, I found several birthday cards Grandma had given me over the years. Most contained simple notes, but one card included something unusual. A folded piece of paper. At first, I assumed it was an old grocery list. Instead, I discovered a handwritten note. The note was short. Grandma had written it years earlier. She reminded me to always ask questions when people discouraged curiosity. She reminded me that honesty survives examination. Then she ended with a sentence that made my stomach tighten. If anyone ever tells you not to look too closely, that is usually where you should start looking. I must have read those words 20 times. Something about them felt intentional, almost like a message left for a future version of me. The next morning, I contacted the law office that had handled Grandma's affairs. The receptionist sounded nervous. She informed me that estate matters were being managed through proper channels and suggested I speak with family representatives. Family representatives. Not beneficiaries. Not heirs. Family representatives. The distinction bothered me. I asked who those representatives were. She hesitated. Then she named my father and Vanessa. Not me. My heart sank. For the first time, I realized I had been completely excluded. Not only from conversations. Not only from decisions. From the process itself. That evening, I confronted Vanessa directly. She was sitting on our parents' back patio scrolling through her phone. I asked why she was involved in estate matters while I remained uninformed. Her smile appeared instantly. It was the same smile she wore at the burial. Calm, confident, almost amused. She told me some people were better equipped to handle responsibility. Then she added that Grandma trusted the family to make smart decisions. The family? Not me. The family? Every word felt carefully chosen. When I pressed harder, her patience disappeared. For a brief moment, her mask slipped. She leaned forward and looked directly into my eyes. Then she told me something I would never forget. She said the world had finally started seeing me the way she always had. Before I could respond, she stood and walked away, leaving me alone with a growing sense of dread. That night, I barely slept. Pieces that once seemed unrelated began forming a larger picture. The burial, the rumors, the silence, the secret meetings, the property assessments, the exclusion, the lies. Everything pointed toward something bigger than family conflict. Something was happening behind the scenes, something connected to Grandma's legacy. And for reasons I still could not fully understand, my sister seemed determined to keep me as far away from it as possible. The answer finally began revealing itself 3 days later, when an unexpected envelope arrived in my mailbox. There was no return address, no explanation, Only a single document inside. A document that contained a property number, a courthouse filing reference, and a date scheduled for review. At the bottom, someone had written 4 words by hand. Look before they finish. I stared at the page for a long time. Because for the first time since Grandma's death, I had something real. And whatever waited inside those courthouse records was important enough that someone had risked warning me before it disappeared. The envelope sat on my kitchen table all night. I must have looked at it 100 times. Every time I picked it up, my pulse accelerated. The courthouse reference number meant nothing to me. The property identification number meant even less. Yet whoever had mailed it clearly believed I would understand its importance. More troubling was the handwritten message at the bottom. Look before they finish. Not before they start. Not before they try. Before they finish. That suggested a process already in motion. A process nearing completion. And somehow I was the only person who seemed unaware of it. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse before it opened. The building itself was older than most structures in town. Thick stone walls surrounded rows of narrow windows. I had passed it countless times throughout my life without paying attention. Now it felt like the center of a mystery that had been quietly growing around me for months. Inside, the records department occupied a large room filled with shelves, computer terminals, and filing cabinets. A clerk helped me locate the referenced file. She asked routine questions and eventually returned carrying several documents. The moment she placed them on the counter, I understood why someone had risked sending me that envelope. The property number belonged to Grandma's land. Not just her house. The entire property, the house, the surrounding acreage, several adjoining parcels, everything. My hands trembled as I turned pages. Near the top of one filing appeared a name. Vanessa Carter. I stared at it in disbelief. My sister's name appeared as the proposed recipient in a transfer process involving the entire estate property. Not a portion. Not shared ownership. The entire property. I immediately searched for additional names. Mine never appeared. The realization hit me so hard that I needed to sit down. I kept reading. The documents referenced internal family agreements, statements regarding management authority, recommendations involving future development opportunities. Every page moved ownership closer toward Vanessa. Every page treated the outcome as inevitable. Yet nowhere could I find my consent. Nowhere could I find evidence that I had even been informed. The deeper I looked, the stranger everything became. Several signatures belonged to my father. Others belonged to Vanessa. Additional forms contained references to consultations and family discussions. Family discussions I had never attended. Family discussions I had never even heard about. The worst part was how official everything looked. Stamped, filed, approved, processed. A casual observer would assume every step had been legitimate. I copied everything I could. Then I drove directly to the attorney's office that had handled Grandma's affairs. This time I refused to leave. After nearly an hour, one of the firm's senior assistants agreed to meet with me privately. She seemed uncomfortable from the moment I entered her office. When I placed copies of the courthouse filings on her desk, her expression changed instantly. She recognized the documents. That much was obvious. She asked where I had obtained them. I answered honestly. Then I asked a question she clearly did not want to hear. Was my grandmother's property being transferred to Vanessa? Several seconds passed before she responded. Her answer was careful. Too careful. She explained that certain matters remained under review. She explained that not all filings reflected final outcomes. She explained that legal processes could be complicated. Not once did she answer my question directly. When I pushed harder, she finally admitted something important. The firm had raised concerns. Concerns? One simple word. But it changed everything. I asked what kind of concerns. She hesitated. Then she informed me that internal disagreements existed regarding interpretation of several documents connected to Grandma's estate. Interpretation? Another carefully chosen word. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that something unusual was happening behind the scenes. Before our meeting ended, she offered one final piece of advice. She told me to obtain independent legal counsel immediately. Not eventually. Not if problems developed. Immediately. I left her office with my stomach in knots. That afternoon, I met with a local attorney named Daniel Brooks. He specialized in estate disputes and property law. After reviewing the documents, he spent nearly 30 minutes silently reading. His silence worried me. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. Then he asked a question I never expected. Had my grandmother ever mentioned protecting me? The question caught me off guard. I told him about our relationship. I told him about the notes she left behind. I told him about the warning she gave me in the hospital. Daniel listened carefully. Then he pointed toward one particular document. According to him, something critical was missing. A final deed authorization. Without it, the transfer process remained incomplete. That sounded like good news. Until he explained the rest. Several filings appeared designed to position Vanessa for ownership, once remaining obstacles disappeared. In other words, someone was building a legal pathway toward a predetermined outcome. Whether that outcome would survive scrutiny remained uncertain, but the effort itself was obvious. For the first time, I stopped viewing the situation as family drama. This was something larger, something deliberate, something planned, and someone had spent months putting pieces into place. Daniel agreed to investigate further. Over the following weeks, he submitted requests, reviewed records, and contacted relevant offices. Every few days, he called with updates. Most were confusing. Some were disturbing. Several referenced documents that seemed to appear and disappear unexpectedly. One filing contradicted another. Certain dates failed to align properly. Some records referenced meetings that lacked supporting documentation. The deeper he dug, the stranger everything became. Meanwhile, my relationship with my family deteriorated rapidly. Vanessa stopped pretending. She no longer bothered hiding her hostility. Family gatherings became impossible. Conversations ended in arguments. Relatives repeated rumors about my supposed greed. Friends distanced themselves. Even people who knew me well seemed influenced by the narrative surrounding Grandma's estate. According to the growing story, I was the problem. I was the one creating conflict. I was the one refusing to move on. The irony would have been amusing if it had not hurt so much. One evening, my father arrived unexpectedly at my apartment. He claimed he wanted peace. He claimed the family needed healing. Then he suggested I stop pursuing legal questions. Not because I was wrong, because continuing would damage relationships. The request revealed more than he intended. If everything had been legitimate, there would be nothing to fear from examination. The harder they pushed me to stop looking, the more convinced I became that I needed answers. Months passed. The estate remained unresolved. Developers continued showing interest in Grandma's land. Property values increased dramatically. New construction projects transformed nearby areas. Land that once seemed ordinary became extremely valuable. And suddenly everything made sense. This was never just about a house. It was about millions. The realization struck during a meeting with Daniel almost a year after Grandma's death. He showed me updated market assessments. The combined value of the property and surrounding parcels had skyrocketed. Conservative estimates placed future worth well above $3 million. $3.2 million in some projections. I sat speechless. $3.2 million? The exact figure explained every lie. Every rumor. Every exclusion. Every manipulation. The burial. The silence. The secret meetings. Everything connected to that number. For the first time, I understood the true motive behind what had happened. Grandma's death had not simply revealed existing cracks within the family. It had exposed something much darker. Greed. The kind of greed capable of turning relatives into strangers. The kind of greed capable of rewriting history. The kind of greed capable of erasing a daughter, granddaughter, and sister from her own family story. And yet, despite everything Daniel uncovered, one crucial question remained unanswered. What had Grandma actually intended? Because no matter how many documents we examined, no matter how many filings we reviewed, one key document remained missing. The final deed. The document that would determine ownership. The document everyone seemed desperate to control. The document that had somehow vanished. Then, nearly 2 years after Grandma's burial, Daniel received a phone call that changed the entire case. A retired clerk from a neighboring county had come across an old storage archive scheduled for digitization. Inside that archive was a reference connected to Margaret Carter. Not estate paperwork. Not probate filings. Something older. Something recorded years before her death. And according to the clerk, the file contained a sealed deed that nobody involved in the current transfer process appeared to know existed. The call from the retired clerk should have changed everything immediately. Instead, it started a waiting game that lasted years. The archive had been misplaced within an older record system. Retrieving the file required approvals, verification procedures, and legal reviews. Daniel warned me not to expect quick answers. Government offices moved slowly under normal circumstances, and this situation was anything but normal. At first, I felt frustrated. Then life forced me to focus elsewhere. The legal battle continued, draining my energy, my savings, and my faith in people. Friends moved away. Relationships ended. Opportunities came and went. While my sister expanded her influence within the family, I learned how to survive on my own. The most painful part was not losing money. It was losing people. Relatives stopped inviting me to gatherings. Holiday celebrations happened without me. Family photographs appeared online featuring everyone except me. Each year, the distance grew wider. Each year, the story Vanessa created became more accepted. I became the difficult granddaughter, the greedy sister, the problem nobody wanted to discuss. Meanwhile, Vanessa flourished, or at least that was how it appeared. She purchased a larger home. She drove expensive vehicles. She spoke confidently about future investments. People treated her like the unofficial guardian of Grandma's legacy. The irony was unbearable. The woman who erased me from the burial now stood at the center of everything Grandma had built. More than once, I considered walking away. More than once, I asked Daniel whether continuing made sense. His answer never changed. Truth has a strange habit of surviving longer than lies. I wanted to believe him. Some days I did. Other days I didn't. By the third year, the legal process had become part of my life. Documents arrived regularly. Hearings occurred periodically. Investigations continued quietly. Several inconsistencies discovered in earlier filings raised new questions. Certain signatures received scrutiny. Timelines failed to match. Statements given by family members contradicted existing records. Little by little, the foundation supporting Vanessa's position began developing cracks. Not enough to destroy it. Not yet, but enough to make people nervous. That nervousness became visible during a family wedding. It was the first major gathering where Vanessa and I occupied the same room in years. She looked different. Older, more tense, less confident. Throughout the evening, she repeatedly glanced in my direction. At one point, our eyes met across the reception hall. For a moment, neither of us looked away. I expected anger. I expected arrogance. Instead, I saw something unexpected. Fear. The sight stayed with me long after the wedding ended. Several months later, Daniel called with news that felt almost unbelievable. The sealed file had finally been recovered. Not a copy. Not a reference. The original document, the deed. For several seconds, I could not speak. 5 years? 5 years of rumors. 5 years of lies. 5 years of being treated like an outsider. And now the document everyone had searched for was finally sitting inside a secure records office. The following weeks felt endless. Verification procedures began. Experts examined signatures. Historical records were reviewed. Every step required careful handling because the implications were enormous. The property had increased significantly in value. Developers remained interested. Millions of dollars depended upon the outcome. Then came the day I will never forget. Daniel invited me to his office. When I arrived, several folders covered the conference table. His expression told me everything before he even spoke. The deed was authentic. Completely authentic. Properly executed. Properly recorded. Legally enforceable. My heart pounded. I asked the question that had haunted me for years. What did Grandma actually do? Daniel opened the file. Then he showed me. I stared at the page. Read it once. Read it twice. Then a third time. Tears filled my eyes, because the deed revealed something nobody expected. Grandma had not left the property to Vanessa. She had not divided it equally. She had not transferred control through the process everyone had assumed. Years before her death, she had quietly established a protected ownership structure connected directly to me. Not because I was her favorite, not because she wanted revenge, because she feared exactly what might happen after she was gone. Attached notes explained her reasoning. Those notes were written in her own hand. She described concerns regarding pressure, manipulation, and future conflicts. She specifically stated her desire to preserve the property from individuals motivated primarily by financial gain. Then came the sentence that broke me. She wrote that she trusted me to protect what generations before us had built. For 5 years, I had questioned everything. My worth, my memories, my relationship with her. Now her own words answered every doubt. The truth had been waiting all along. The deed changed the legal landscape immediately. Proceedings accelerated. Filings were challenged. Ownership claims collapsed under scrutiny. The carefully constructed pathway toward Vanessa's control began unraveling piece by piece. News spread quickly. Relatives who ignored me started calling. People who once believed rumors suddenly wanted conversations. The same community that had accepted Vanessa's version now struggled to understand what had really happened. But the most dramatic moment came several months later. A final hearing was scheduled to resolve outstanding disputes. Representatives, attorneys, interested parties, everyone attended, including Vanessa. When she entered the room, she looked nothing like the woman who had taken the microphone at Grandma's burial. Her confidence was gone. Her certainty had vanished. Years of pressure showed on her face. The hearing itself lasted hours. Documents were presented, records examined, testimony reviewed. Then the deed was formally entered into the proceeding. The room became silent. Every argument that had supported Vanessa's position suddenly lost strength. Every assumption collapsed. Every narrative fell apart. The document spoke more clearly than any witness ever could. And when the truth finally settled over the room, something happened that I never expected. Vanessa approached me afterward. Not in public view, not surrounded by attorneys. Just the two of us in a quiet hallway. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she started crying. I had not seen my sister cry like that since childhood. Not controlled tears. Not performative tears. Real tears. She apologized. At first, the words came slowly. Then they poured out. She admitted her jealousy. She admitted her resentment. She admitted how angry she had always been about my relationship with Grandma. She admitted that once money became involved, everything spiraled beyond control. The sister who had spent years portraying herself as certain suddenly looked completely lost. Then she asked me for help. Not money, not property. Help. Her financial situation had deteriorated. Investments failed. Debts accumulated. Relationships collapsed. The image she spent years building had hidden serious problems. She told me she did not know how to fix her life. The moment felt surreal. 5 years earlier, she had erased me from Grandma's burial. Now she stood before me asking for mercy. For a long time, I said nothing. I thought about the rumors, the isolation, the betrayal, the countless nights spent wondering why my family had abandoned me. I thought about Grandma. I thought about the lessons she taught me in her garden. Then I remembered something she used to say. Bitterness is another way of letting pain control your future. So I made a decision, not for Vanessa, for myself. I told her I would not spend my life seeking revenge. I told her forgiveness was possible. Trust would take longer, much longer. But forgiveness was possible. She cried harder after that. Maybe because she expected hatred. Maybe because she knew she had earned it. Or maybe because for the first time in years, the lies were finally over. Today, the property remains protected exactly as Grandma intended. The land has become more valuable than anyone imagined. But the money no longer matters as much to me. What matters is what the deed revealed. Not ownership. Not wealth. Truth. A single document survived years of manipulation, rumors, and greed. A single document restored my grandmother's voice after her death. And in the end, that voice said something stronger than any courtroom argument. It said she knew who I was all along. While others tried to erase me, she made certain that one day the truth would speak for itself. And when it finally did, everyone listened. If there is one lesson I learned from everything that happened, it is that truth may be delayed, but it is very difficult to bury forever. For years I was blamed, ignored, and erased, yet the truth survived where lies could not. My grandmother's faith in me became stronger than greed, manipulation, and time itself. If this story touched you, write a comment below saying I made it to the end so I can see who stayed with me until the final moment. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Thank you for being here and for sharing this journey with me.